This guy, if you didn't already know, was Alexander the Great's father. And actually, Alexander might not have been able to achieve everything that he did without the incredible feats of his father. His father was probably the best Macedonian king up to that point in Macedonian history. Philip was born in 382 BCE. His own father died when he was about 12, so during his early years his older brothers ruled in turn. Macedon at this point was a story of failure and weakness, with regional nobles challenging the power of the crown, and foreign powers like the Athenians and the Illyrians butting their heads with the kingdom. Around the time of his father's death, Philip was actually sent as a hostage to the Greek city-state of Thebes. This was a rare period, when Thebes was the most powerful out of the Greek city-states. The great military general Epaminondas was living in Thebes, and he might have been one of the best and most creative Greek generals of the period. He learned a lot about the politics of the Greek city-state, as well as the way their armies were structured, and this played a large role in Philip's future. The year after Philip returned to Macedon, in 359 BCE, his brother and the current king of Macedon, Perdiccas, went to meet an invasion by the Illyrian tribes. But Perdiccas was killed here, and Philip, to his own surprise, came to the throne. He probably hadn't expected to sit on the throne at all, considering that he had two elder brothers, but they were both now dead, and he was definitely thrown into the deep end of kingship. The Illyrians were invading from the northwest, the Paeonians were raiding northern Macedon, and within Macedon itself, there were a couple rival claimants to the throne who were being supported by foreign powers. So Philip acted practically, eliminating the problem of southern invasion by paying off his dangerous southern neighbours, while he went off campaigning in the north. He could now start to deal with the Paeonians. In 358 BCE he invaded, defeating their armies and eliminating them as a threat. He then turned his attention to the Illyrians, who'd been a thorn in the side of Macedon for years. And the Illyrians were promptly defeated, and now Macedon's northern border was secure. When all this was concluded, Philip celebrated by marrying what was probably his third or fourth wife. Her name was Olympias, and she would be the mother of Alexander the Great. Next on Philip's to-do list was retaking the town of Amphipolis, which he had ceded to the Athenians a few years back to ensure that they didn't attack him. Amphipolis, if captured, would give Philip access to Thrace, the area of modern-day eastern Greece and Istanbul. The town was quickly taken by Philip, who went on to take the settlement of Crenides, which was recently founded to extract silver and gold from the new mines of Mount Pangaeus. And as this all happened, Athens' navy could do nothing to stop Philip from attacking deep into Thrace. At the same time as this was happening, there was a civil war in Thessaly, just south of Macedon, but north of the majority of the Greek city-states. Philip used this to his advantage to gain access to Greece. He intervened on the side of Thebes, and they started to fight against Athens. But they were defeated. Philip was defeated in 353 BCE. But he recovered his position in the next year and pushed the Athenians south. Athens occupied the famous part at Thermopylae to restrict Philip's advance, and Philip opted not to attack it, since Thermopylae, another battle there, would be a bloodbath. But Philip's victories in Thessaly aided him in being voted the Archon, or the president of the Thessalian League, a group of city-states in Thessaly. Philip now had the significant upper hand against Athens, and could have chosen to press his advantage. But instead he thought more long-term, and realised that he wanted to have Athens as a friendly ally opposed to a resentful defeated city-state. Thus, Philip was the one to start peace negotiations with the Athenians, who were pressed by the threat that Philip could cut their imported grain from Russia. And the Treaty of Peace was then ratified in 346 BCE. The 3 years after this were spent by Philip diplomatically influencing Greece, making as many friends as he could by paying politicians and offering up some of his armies as mercenaries. But as this was happening, some prominent Athenians were starting to speak out against Macedon, led by Demosthenes. This continued up to and through Philip's campaign into Thrace when trying to conquer the area, and eventually in 340 BCE Athens declared war. Philip wanted to march on Athens, and wanted to pass by his nominal ally Thebes on the way. But Thebes had been swayed by Athens, since they now too saw Macedon as more of a threat to their years of hegemony over the Greek cities. The Thebans therefore refused Philip access and joined arms with the Athenians. This culminated in the Battle of Chaeronea. The Macedonians had about 32,000 soldiers and the allied Greeks 35,000. Philip arrayed his armies with his son, Alexander, leading the left flank, his core phalanx in the centre, and himself on the right. The Thebans were on the flank opposite Alexander, and the Athenians opposite Philip, with their infantry facing the Macedonian phalanx. There's a couple of different ideas about how this battle might have been fought. One is that a feigned retreat by Philip drew the Athenian militia out of line, causing the central Greek infantry to move to the right to fill the gaps in, at which point a gap formed between the Thebans and the central infantry corps. Alexander then charged through this gap with his cavalry and attacked the army from behind, while the Macedonian phalanx crashed into them from the front. The other idea is that it was simply a hard-fought infantry battle, which the Macedonians won due to the use of their new weapon, the sarissa, which was basically a pike that was about twice the length of the Greek spears. Nonetheless, Philip won the day and now dominated Greece. Thebes had its democratic constitution replaced with a pro-Macedonian government, but Athens was not meddled with. Philip wanted to be able to rely on the Athenian navy for the future ambitions of conquering Persia. In order to maintain his new hegemony and the peace that came with it, Philip created the League of Corinth, which all Greek states except Sparta agreed to. But by this point, Sparta was a shell of its former self, so this was not a problem for Philip, and in fact he just ignored it. Now that Greece had been dealt with, Philip could begin his largest ambition of invading Persia. In 338 BCE, an advance force of Macedonians crossed into Anatolia. Soon enough, Philip hoped to join them and conquer Persia. But before then, there was a bit of celebration to be had, and Philip attended a grand feast celebrating the marriage of his daughter Cleopatra. But disaster struck, and Philip was murdered by a man named Pausanias. He was a Greek who felt that he had not been granted justice by Philip in a previous matter. So before he could achieve his dream, Philip was dead. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, it really helps the channel, and if you want to see more content, obviously subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.